want to talk rugby, and I'm delighted to say Lynne Cantwell is with us, South Africa Women's High Performance Director. Lynne, good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
And what part of the world are you in?
Oh God, yeah, I'm still stuck. Haven't got to South Africa yet. Still waiting on visa, so kind of email watching and phone watching at the moment.
How is the new gig going then?
Yeah, look, it's really, really good. It's great. There's so much work to do, which is great. But there's a massive willingness for change and a willingness to want to support and help. So that's great. I think I'm just kind of managing volume and how to prioritize what we need to do. But logistically, they're like South Africa are obviously still, from an office point of view, still working from home. So a lot of that stuff is still possible. And if anything, because it's such a big country, being able to work virtually is helping, being able to connect with people in all of the different provinces, because there's 14 different provinces. So we obviously have to work through the provinces to get work done in the game. So yeah, lots of work being done and plenty more to do. But I think until I get there, I won't get a real sense of what I'm missing by not being there, but that will happen. In
terms of the playing population, what are the numbers like for the women's game in South Africa?
Yeah, it's a bit mad. Like our numbers are actually very similar to Ireland, which is crazy for a population of 80 million. So there's probably only about kind of 3,000, 4,000 adult players, but there's 10, 20,000 younger girls playing. And I think that the model, it's really interesting. I think the models by which you kind of foresee and operate on, being from Europe or from Ireland, you just make a lot of assumptions that it's going to be the same in other countries. And I think what you see over there, because there's just such a high volume of population, is that I think how we approach things are going to be very, very different. So I think, for example, yes, there's 3,000, 4,000 adult players, but relatively not a huge amount of investment in the game so far. But what you'd imagine you'll see is those numbers skyrocketing over the next couple of years, fingers crossed. And that's not just like the stuff that we're doing, but it'll be if you can increase accessibility of rugby on the ground in the communities, in the provinces, I think the take up will be just way bigger, because rugby is seen over there as just like a royal sport, and it's something that everybody wants to get involved in. So if girls aren't being involved in it, it's more just it's not accessible, as opposed to they don't want to, So I think once we open the door, I'd imagine that we'll get a high volume of players. And I think what I seem to see happening in the men's structures, and although they have just an incredibly, amazingly robust kind of high school system that encourages so many boys to players, which kind of drives performance. So what you see is that the numbers itself drives performance at the top, as opposed to other things that we need in other countries. So I'm hoping is that when we get more players into the game, that will kind of just self-generate performance at the top. And yeah, but there's a good bit of work to do before that happens.
Are there lessons that you're looking at other rugby systems around the world and saying a bit of this will apply here and a bit of this won't, but some of this over here will apply?
Yeah, like I actually did a kind of competitor analysis around the world, and I think the one things that you look to is obviously geography. So your Australias, your Americas, you can compare because they're similar sized countries, etc. And there's some learnings there. Definitely America in the size of how far people have to travel to come to camps, etc. But I think the one thing that is unique to South Africa is the combination of economics, politics, society. So in a way, you're picking on other countries' models and trying to kind of create a bespoke approach. And I think for me, the one thing I've said from the get-go is that like I can bring international experience and kind of women's sport context and the research that we know so far in that kind of emerging topic, which is really important. But like I need them to translate it into a South African context culturally, because obviously I don't know that. So I think that's a nice collaboration, and it's kind of working well. But there's some funny things that are happening, like even in the women in leadership space, which obviously we do lots of work in. I think the assumptions of what we see in our country, in Ireland or the UK, in Europe, as to kind of what holds kind of women in leadership back. Often they're things, yes, around structure, and this is how we used to do things, a lack of understanding of like how we represent sport at the moment, but also things like, family commitments and, yes, the role of women in society, all of those things. Whereas I think what we're seeing in South Africa is quite different, is that there's a massive structurally, I think there's just so little there, but there's a huge will and the want of women to say, I can do this, I want to do this, just put me there. So I think we're seeing different insights over there as to what would hold kind of women in leadership back, or I'm sure you can apply those insights to other sectors. They relate very closely, but they're not the same as what we see in other countries, which I suppose is what you'd expect.
Yeah, everything is always local in the end. Just can you talk a little bit though about the situation in Ireland, and are we getting better at removing any of those barriers that we have traditionally put up in Irish sport to getting more women involved in leadership roles?
Are we getting better? Yeah, look, I think like this is very easy to focus on the ones that are not. And there's definitely some that are not still. But there's definitely a lot that are. We are getting better. I think we understand the context more. I think we understand this principle around, like if we're talking about leadership, we're talking about boards and senior management or coaching positions, for example. That's usually how we're kind of defining leadership at the moment within this kind of progressive space. And when we definitely recognise that there's a need, we recognise that boards, for example, should represent society as opposed to just the people in the sport. So if you have 10 men on a board, for example, and no women or one woman, you're representing your sport very well, but that sport is just for guys. It's not representing society. And you can imagine if we had an equally representative board, and you can imagine what your sport could look like. And I think that's what like golf have taken really good steps towards, etc. And we're just talking about gender, obviously, but we're not talking about obviously other minorities or other cohorts, for example. So this is where the diversity and inclusive debate comes in. So I think we're getting better at the understanding. But I think structurally, I think is a huge problem still, because a lot of our sports are governed and structured in a very complicated way. So it's very hard. You have to do a certain thing to get on that club committee, and then do a certain thing to get on that provincial committee, and then do a certain thing to get up to that presidential committee, for example. And that's deeply, deeply embedded and systemic and complicated. And to try and even start for females to flow through to that system is just really hard. So I think when you go into that depth, which is the reality in some of the sports, I think that's really harder. And I think that's where you have to start looking to policy and to higher level things to say, look, it's just not acceptable. Because if we continued at the rate that we're going, we wouldn't have any form of 40% of board representation until 2065, or is that okay? Are we going to wait till 2065 where our sports are equal? And I think what we're not saying is just equal from a gender point of view. What we're saying is like a well-governed sport is a diverse board, and governance governs all. So our sport in general will do better if we have a more diverse board. So I think men's sports will do an awful lot better if we have better decision making and better representation at a board level. So let's hope that we'll get there soon.
So coupling the funding, the government funding, with the requirement to be more diverse is the only way out of this. If you look at how quickly the FAI changed their structures, it was very painful for them to do so, and a lot of members in the FAI didn't think they should do it or shouldn't be forced to do it, but they had to do it because they needed the government bailout. And all of a sudden a bunch of non-executive directors are on the board, and suddenly the board looks like it's more diverse, and let's wait and see. Hopefully it's successful, and we wish them all the best. But the other sports organisations who aren't in moments of crisis and don't quite, I mean, they are all now obviously because of COVID, but they have their hand out to the government, and the government's kind of like, yeah, here's the money. You should do a bit better on the diversity thing. You haven't done as well as you could. Okay, don't worry. Here's the money anyway. We need to be a bit more militant about it, right?
Yeah, look, I definitely support that. So one of the big things that Sport Ireland are doing and pushing really, really hard on, and it's very zero tolerance as to the deadlines that the sports reach, is this governance code. So governance code is a code by which all sports and charities in Ireland should operate. And within that, there's an expectation of lots of things and how you operate, but definitely from like a gender and a diverse board. So the expectation is for all sports to align to that by the end of this year. Now, at the same time, that's still a little bit lighter touch than what we're saying, which is, you should attach funding to how you govern your sports. Now, I'm definitely pro that. And I'm definitely pro, like, there's a great debate around quotas and etc. I think I'm pro that now, because I just see that if you don't do it then people don't move and the accountability is not there. So, and I think on the argument of healthy governance, like if we go down that route and say, if diversity and inclusive boards are a reflection of you governing, as in how you govern your organization and how you make business decisions and how you operate progressively into the future, if that's a reflection of a diverse board, then I think we really need to look to being stricter in our expectations of the sports, because there's I think 11, 12 sports from a female representation point of view that are still below 10%, and if worse, like 8% and 4%. Like I have zero tolerance around that, because I think that yes, it's poor from a gender point of view, but what else does that reflect in your sport? And I'd be very hopeful that we'd be able to take stronger steps towards making that change.
I know you've yet to fly down there yet, Lynne, but I presume that this will be really interesting from a South African standpoint as well, to see the work that they've done when it comes to diversity on a political level and seeing how that's actually dripping down into sport in general and into rugby union in general.
Yeah, look, it's really, really fascinating. So South Africa are on have a government mandate towards transformation, and obviously formally that's racial transformation. But I think what you see from a diversity point of view is a massive understanding of how important it is for us to progress in our society to reflect the reality of our society. And when you look at it through that lens, that's when you look to, how we're operating at the moment, most certainly kind of privileges and fortunes a certain cohort, and look at all of these other cohorts that we're not representing. So I think what's exciting about South Africa is all that they're faced with lots of other things with regard to kind of political and societal and economic challenges that we wouldn't have in other countries. At a kind of behavioural society level and humanist level, there's a massive buy-in to change and progress and equality. And that's not to say that there's not a million ways to do that is easier. Is policy or progress in leadership or coaching or pathways or commercial partners, for example. There's a complete yes, we need to do that. And I, like we speak about in Ireland and Sport Ireland, from women in sport point of view, we speak about this ecosystem, this tapestry of an approach that we're trying to make, in that the women in sport policy will focus on those 4 key pillars. And yes, they're a priority, and yes, they're key from a strategy and a policy change type of thing. But there's so much other good work that needs to be done. And like the 20 by 20 campaign demonstrated that, and just like the all of the work being done with the LGFA and the camogie, the ladies camogie, with regard to balance there. So that's all really, really important. And in South Africa, you find that too, is that everybody just sees the inequality in lots of the things of how they operate. So there's a massive willingness to want to change. But the challenge is, I think over there, a lot of it, if it's finance, a lot of it is reliant on the government for finance, which can only go so far. And as a result, they look very, very strongly to private sponsorship. And like from a female sports point of view, the female sports like cricket, hockey, the ones that have done well are often the ones that have been connected with a big sponsor. So that's something that we're working hard on, is like, how do we create the identity of women's rugby? How do we position that in society over there, in a place whereby sponsors want to connect? So I'd feel hopeful that we'll try to get something over the line this year. And I think one of the challenges that we have there from a female point of view is that although rugby is a gospel sport, and definitely a reflection of what society, what a multicultural society can do on the rugby pitch from a performance point of view, and the women's game isn't positioned there yet, and it represents a very different demographic too. So what we're trying to do is position women's rugby over there as a sport where girls can really connect to and see that, this is a sport that I can go to be safe. This is a sport that I can go to be welcome and valued. This is a sport that I can go to be encouraged to think for myself and grow myself as a woman and as a player, and then hopefully achieve the aspirations. And this is a sport that I can be equally respected in, like the guys are. And I think once you get that type of support behind you in a society that just loves rugby, I'd be really hopeful that we can really take it somewhere special.
Is it too simplistic to suggest that if the British and Irish Lions were to ever have a women's tour, that would be automatically beneficial for South Africa?
Yeah, like I know this debate is going around at the moment, and I know lots of my rugby community actually aren't in favour of it. They just don't think that the model that the Lions use can be naturally copied and pasted onto the guys, and like that's often the case. And but I'm actually pro it. I'm not saying that South Africa are ready for it at all. I do think New Zealand can make it work. I think Australia could make it work. It might just need to be a little bit different. I'd imagine in 2025 South Africa would be a better place to have it. Even though I think the Lions tour would probably shift, it would. I don't know if it'd be on the same year as the guys. So maybe they'd be ready for it sooner than that. But like I do, like I'm pro women's tour for the Lions. I think it'd be cracking.
And who do you get to cheer for then when the Lions are playing South Africa now that you're working for South Africa?
Yeah, you know what? Like, it's really interesting. I absolutely love Irish rugby. Like, I love and adore it. And even I'm packing up at the moment, and I've been looking yesterday at all of just the jerseys that I've picked up over the years. And you kind of hold on to them because you want to give them to your daughter or your son or something like that. And you just kind of go through this like mad memory lane, and it's just wonderful. At the same time, what I love also is sports that like really engage and want to grow all sport, you know. So I think from a South Africa point of view, I really respect what they're trying to do in the women's game, and I actually have been welcomed so much, and I think I've been really taken aback by how accessible everybody is and how much they want to grow the women's game, but just want me to be part of the team. Like I've sat in analysis sessions with the Springboks, and I'm there with decision-making processes around kind of elite coach development for the men and the women too. So I think I see it in a different lens now, and I see how rugby can operate and sport can operate, and it doesn't have to be a man-woman thing. And I really respect that. So I think I'm supporting the Springboks because, you know, I think they're a great bunch. And then obviously the Lions I'm supporting too, but like I'm a complete rugby romantic when it comes to that too. So you're like, get off my screen, you know, pick a side. But yeah, like it's just going to be a good tour.
I get it. That's you like everybody at the moment, and that's fine. That's totally allowed. You're one of the few people in the world who's going to get away with one of those half and half jerseys for once. Thanks a million for joining us, and best of luck. It's a really fascinating story. Thanks a million.
No worries. See you then. Bye bye.